Now, the thing about John's Gospel is that it's got a trick in it that sort of goes past us. Because we used to read the advertiser, right? And if the advertiser said it happened, it's true. Okay? That's called playing for a laugh. Thank you for laughing, John. John does something else. John tells us these stories, and we think, hang on, how does that work? So, John says, you must be born again if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven. And Nicodemus says, what? He says, I'm an old bloke. How could I re-enter my mother's womb and be born again, you see? And so we think, he's a bit mystical, I'll skip that bit. Or sometimes scholars say, I don't think he knew what he was doing. He was just patching stories together and he was pretty clumsy, actually. I think what he's doing is he's putting these things together and he's banging us into common sense and a paradox and asking us to see something deeper. So all through John there's these little bits that sort of make you think, hang on, that's weird. What's going on here? And that's what he means to do. He means for us to spot the odd bits that you wouldn't normally expect to be there. Now, Gwen's going to read chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. Gwen's in the corner of the camera there. So John chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. Can you pick? I'm going to ask you, okay? Pick out the bit that's supposed to make us think. What? We'll have a test afterwards. Thanks, Gwen.
Okay. Chapter 12 in John. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly ointment of pure nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the ointment. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was to betray him, said, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief. And as he had the money box, he used to take what was put into it. Jesus said, let her alone. Let her keep it for the day of my burial. The poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me. Here is the reading. May God be praised for those words from Scripture.
So, what's the funny, strange little twist in that reading? Any take?
Is it when Mary washed Jesus' feet?
Yeah, why? What's funny about that, you reckon?
Women weren't meant to do those other things. They were in the back room doing nothing or getting the food ready, but not participating in the actual events out front. It's usually a man's job.
Yeah, I wonder if we're reading. I wonder if we're reading a little bit. Some Jewish women scholars suggest that we read, even though it was a very masculine society, we read a little bit of our sexism into that. And certainly in Luke, she's up the front, Mary, and Jesus says she's chosen the better part. But it's definitely in that area. What were you going to say, Wes? Servant's job to wash the feet. Right? Yes.
Well, it was a ministry in providing the food and also washing up the dishes. I wish I had that ministry.
Thank you, Gwen. Okay, we'll come back to it because it's interesting, we've skirted around the edge of it. Okay?
I'm going to put something over the way. It is literally
Okay, so to read John, well, let's put it all into some context. To read John, we can't take little snippy bits, because then those paradoxes really, they go really strange. Okay, so the big sweep of John, we might start back in John chapter 10, and he says, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. That's his purpose. Okay? Then we move on to chapter 11, and we get Lazarus, who's died. He's well and truly dead. He's been in the tomb for 4 days. 3 days, and you hadn't sat up, you were legally dead. So 4 days is really dead, right? And Jesus raises him from the dead. And it's got this image of Lazarus coming out. He's still wrapped up in the bandages, like the zombie. And Jesus says, unbind him. So this life and life more abundantly is about being freed, perhaps being freed from death. And in that same chapter, Martha, the one that Luke teaches us wasn't the spiritual one, she was the one that did all the housework. Martha says, you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. So he's come to give us life and give us more abundantly. He frees us from death. He's the Messiah. And then we jump into chapter 12. And what have we got? We've got Lazarus who's been raised from the dead, and he's sitting down at a big banquet with Jesus, which is, that's a picture of heaven if ever there was in Jewish imagery, right? But then what happens is Mary anoints his feet, and he says, this is an anointing for my burial. And he's getting grim. It's getting close to Palm Sunday and then to being arrested in that next week. But the scary thing is, in the next chapter, he's having another meal with the disciples. So that's us and Mary. And he starts to wash the disciples' feet. And Peter says, no, you're not going to wash my feet. Which, we interpret as Peter saying, you shouldn't be washing my feet. And Jesus said, unless I wash your feet, you have no part of me. And Peter says, well, okay, you wash my hands and head, do the lot. In that case, I want to be part of you, okay? We've just been told that foot washing is an embalming preparation for death. So people would say, if you don't let Jesus wash your feet, prepare you for death, your journey stops there. That's what one of my colleagues says on the net. But the good news is that that's actually to give us life more abundantly. Somewhere John is trying to turn our understanding of what's good for us and what gives us life upside down and show us something else. You think, this notion that somehow being, he's not talking about timely death in old age. He's talking about death by discipleship, if you like, being on the losing side. That's a bit heavy. How does that work? And that's where I think we learn something from this strange event of the Mary anointing Jesus' feet. Now, we don't tend to think about this, but actually the anointing of feet is what happens in the bedroom. Okay? It's even more striking in that text because what they show us, you've seen the story of the Last Supper, and they're all set up around the table like not a story, a painting, like a photo shoot. Okay? But actually people would recline to eat. So you're propped up on an elbow. So this woman is almost lying down with Jesus, anointing his feet and drying them with her hair. It's a very strongly erotic image. If I can read somebody here, her name's China Tetzlaff. The unbinding of hair is reserved only for a husband. In our culture, caressing another's feet is not generally done outside the bedroom. Thus, the familiarity of Mary's action is astounding, embarrassing, and uncomfortable for those who are witnessing or reading about such intimacy. Mary is shameless as she steps far outside the bounds of convention, teetering on the edge of scandal. Mary's actions are laced with a wanton tenderness found between married couples, not an unmarried man and woman. Even for Jesus, who regularly stepped outside the social conventions binding women of his time, the fact that he allows her to perform this display of tender love is astonishing. So, if we were recreating a Jewish supper and Max was cast in the role of Jesus and then someone came up and started doing what Mary did, Max would be terribly embarrassed and we would avert our eyes, because to watch that is like being a peeping Tom. See, that's what happens if we think about it in terms of the physical, literal story. But what's the symbolic story? What do feet symbolise symbolically? Because there's something quite intriguing. Let me get the details here. This is Professor Alice McKenzie. The text is not about watching Jesus put his hands on somebody else's feet. It's about letting Jesus put his hands on our feet. Not all of us want that. We don't want Jesus handling our feet, because to allow Jesus to touch our feet is to allow him to touch our will. We all have a mind, we all have emotions, and we have a will, our decision-making power. Our feet are how we put our decisions into motion. We can think about doing something. I think I'll go to her father's memorial service out of respect for her. We can feel we ought to do something. I have a feeling it would be a good thing to do. But if we're going to actually show up and walk up to her after the funeral and offer a comforting embrace, our feet have to be involved. So to allow Jesus to cleanse our feet is to remove all that prevents us from using our feet to follow him, to scrub away our insecurities, to wash away our weariness, to buff off our bitterness. If we don't allow him to cleanse our feet, our story with him stops now. So, that's where the spiritual story is taken us. It works like this. In the Gospels, there's a story about a dinner, and a woman anoints Jesus' head with oil. People get a bit upset with that. So that's in the Gospel of Mark, in the Gospel of Matthew. By the time we get to the Gospel of Luke, somehow the story is changed to the woman actually wiping Jesus' feet with her hair, anointing his feet with her hair. And Luke, or the person who told Luke, doesn't quite know what to do with it, and they kind of deflect it, all that eroticism. They read it literally. So what they say is, she was a woman of the city, a sinner. You see what they've done there? What they've done is say, oh, don't worry about the eroticism. You know, she didn't know any better. She was hysterical. She was a sinner. She was glad of her forgiveness. But they don't deal with the eroticism. But John chooses Mary, who's above reproach, and he makes it the centrepiece of the story, which our generation kind of steps around and we don't see it. So we get the sense this is kind of a bit over the top, but we don't mention the eroticism. One of my colleagues in Perth was talking, some of us have been talking about this during the week, and she said she had read the story of this story, John 12:1-8, Mary washing Jesus' feet, to a class of girls in a church school. And one of the girls says, Reverend Mari, in the next chapter, Jesus is washing the disciples' feet. Are those two linked? Because that would be really erotic. That generation sees it. Judas sees it, and he can't handle it. He comes out and he says, why wasn't this money given to the poor? Which we interpret that as being sincere. What it really is, it's Judas being confronted by the intimacy. It's not the physical, don't understand, it's not the physical intimacy. What the foot washing and the wiping with the hair is a symbol of intimacy with God, intimacy with Jesus. becoming close and taken by Jesus, and he doesn't want anything of it. And what does he do? He immediately utters words about money. And money is the currency of the material world. Right? And somewhere here we've said, money, the currency of the material, is being contrasted with spirit, which is the realm of giving and being taken. So Judas just isn't going to have any part of it. And Peter's sort of nearly going to do the same thing until Jesus says, unless I wash your feet. You're saying that you'll have no part of it. We can't fully enter into that life in all its fullness if we refuse intimacy with God. So here's the thing to see, and this is very hard for us because we read the advertiser and all its lurid details, right? This story is about desire. But it's not about physical desire. If you've been fortunate to have a relationship, a physical relationship, you know that it operates on two levels. Especially when we're younger, it's just biology and sex, right? But then, there's something deeper, isn't there? There's something about wanting to be held and to be loved, to be important for our own sake. Something that is. It's a bit like if you were fortunate, and not everybody's been here. It's a bit like the little kid who can just launch themselves into grandma's lap or into mum's lap and be held. And they're not a care in the world because they're at one with the person who's given them birth. Right? And so what this story really is about, in some senses, is for us who have grown up and have walked away from our physical parents, or may not have even known their physical parents, or been abused by them. But it's about all of us finding our way back to the one who holds us and gives us significance. So I'm going to read those words again slowly because they're important. Goes to the very centre of who we are as people. John 12 is showing us a woman, but it could have shown us a man. A woman who is fulfilling her desire to be known and held and loved and to be safe in the world, to her desire to matter to somebody. And there's only one way to have that desire filled, and that's to give ourselves to somebody. And it's what the kids do. The little kids. They just give themselves. So, I've got here, in some ways, after leaving childhood, life is about learning to give ourselves to Jesus, our whole selves, without reserve. And that's not language that I use easily because it gets schmaltzed up and cheapened with sort of sentimental preaching that I don't think really understands how radical a concept that is. But what if you could imagine taking that inner self, that very core of yourself that you just don't show to other people, and placing that in the arms of God, simply being held and loved. That's what John's talking about. Or imagining that being held when it's your turn in the waiting room, waiting for the doctor. That's actually called giving ourselves to Jesus. Giving ourselves to Spirit, if you like. And sometimes I find that that's all I've got left to give. Just this little frightened, very lonely child who doesn't know where he is and how he's going to cope. And you know, I think actually that's the most significant and